Yeah, thanks again, guys. I know it's short notice that I put this one on again for the coaches, and with great opportunity to have Todd. Just been talking to Todd over the weekend, and to try and get a little bit more in while we're still in lockdown. Hopefully, everyone gets back into things tomorrow. But Todd, as many of you know, was just in the junior years, worked with Nick in Canberra, had the great opportunity also to have the AIS at that time located in Canberra, and also had Annerly Poulos in his environment. So two of our better juniors at the time, and two completely different outcomes with those athletes to date. But want to welcome Todd and appreciate him just taking the time before he jumps back out on court, because as he told me earlier, ACT really hasn't been in lockdown besides when COVID first hit, but they've been COVID free for 18 months. So pretty fortunate. But thanks, Todd, for joining all of us, and look forward to hearing your thoughts on talent in different environments.
Thanks, Dan. You hear me okay?
Yeah, all good.
Beauty. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate the invite, Sandon. Really enjoy talking tennis at any point. I certainly developed my skills as a coach just from listening to other coaches and talking to some great coaches, having a beer with Anthony Lane or David Taylor or Sandon or Chris Marnie or Bran. Or I think just these chats and these little conversations, you can pick things up and can be really important for coaches. I think it's really important for coaches to share knowledge. Certainly that's how I developed as a coach. So hopefully I can keep you engaged for the next 15, 20 minutes, and we can have some discussion at the end. Would be great. I think the crux of my presentation says on the front page there, when talent meets environment, great things can happen. And I think in Canberra, I ran the National Academy for 15 years, had a lot of support from TA, be able to create a great environment. And I think the couple of players that we had out of Canberra who became truly world-class really comes down to that environment that we were able to create. Certainly not my coaching, but possibly the environment that I was able to create here in Canberra. So just before I go into that, I wanted to talk about my coaching philosophy just quickly. Just three things, very simple. First one, know the game. I think as a coach, a high performance coach, you got to know the modern game. You got to keep watching the modern game. I spent the last couple of months watching a lot of French Open, Wimbledon, a lot of the women's tennis because I'm coaching girls. I certainly learned a lot. It'd be interesting to hear people's thoughts, but I thought that the serve and forehand in the women's tennis really improved, really becoming a lot more dominant than it was. So I think through juniors and you got to get to nationals. You got to travel internationally if you can. You've got to be on top of what's happening in the game. If you're going to develop a high performance player, you got to have an end goal in sight. You got to know where you're heading and why you're heading there. The second thing, which is what we're going to talk about today, is creating a great environment and why that's so important. And out of my three things here, for sure, that's the most important thing. If you took a coach out of a great environment, I think you could still have a great player. But if you took the environment and you only had a coach, then you really might struggle. That's certainly been my experience. The third one is you need to find the time within the week to coach each player as an individual and work on their individual priorities. I think it's an individual sport, and you got to develop so many skills with each player. There's so much to work on, and you need that time within the week. So I think it's really important to be able to do that. Summing up my philosophy, I really believe anything is possible in tennis when you get talented players and you combine that with a great environment. I really believe the sky's the limit, and it doesn't matter if you're in Canberra, it's a really small place, or you're at Bollettieri's, or you're in France or Russia. If you've got a great environment, you've got talent that walks through your door, then great things can happen. So I think, if you look at top 20 players, if I look at Nick Kyrgios, Alex de Minaur, Ash Barty, pick anyone, Federer, Nadal, Serena Williams, they're not average people. They possess X factor qualities that I certainly don't know how to teach. If I did, well, then I'd be the greatest coach in the world and I'd be churning out Nick Kyrgioses every year. It's just not possible in an individual sport, I don't think, to certainly my experience, to teach these really freaky things. You know, I just made a list here of all the freaky things that I think Nick possesses. And I didn't teach any of these. So his unbelievable hand-eye coordination, his phenomenal ball striking, and his timing and feel, his ability to pick up things, his skill acquisition so quickly, his composure and courage under pressure is, I think, really good most of the time. You know, this one, the crux of his game, ability to hit these serves consistently in the corners at 65% at 200 kilometers an hour. I might have taught him some good fundamentals on his serve, but I didn't teach him this ability. This is all him, this stuff. Tactically, just how good he is and how naturally tactically good he was from a young age. I just wanted to tell one little story of when he was 15 years old. We were playing ITFs in Asia, and it was a big match. We were on the journey, trying to get to the Grand Slams, trying to get the ranking up. It's about the quarters or semis of a big tournament, a lot of points on the line, a lot of rankings on the line. And we had to play a guy who had a one-handed backhand, pretty bad backhand, pretty big hole in his game, pretty big weakness. And the guy was a good player, world-class player, but very dodgy backhand. And as I do with most of my players, before the match I said, Nick, we know this guy's got a poor backhand. How do you think you can expose that? And he rattled off about 4 or 5 tactical things in a row without any prompting from me. He said, Todd, on the first court, I'm going to serve him wide. First serves, I'm going to open up the first ball into his backhand. I'll get him running into his backhand, put him under pressure. On the second court, I'm going to serve him wide. He's not going to be able to get his backhand cross court. I'm going to run around. I'm going to hit my forehand, big into his forehand, open up the court, get him running out that side. He said, in the rally, when first opportunity you get, I'm going to take my backhand down the line. I'm going to burn him down there so he can't camp over in his backhand corner and dictate with his forehand. He said, what first shot I get, I'm going to hit heavy into his backhand. He won't be able to get it cross court. I'm going to run around my backhand. I'm going to dictate play with my forehand. Like, that's just, I just sat there and said, yeah, mate, that's what I had written down as well. Like, this phenomenal tactical ability and knowledge and ability to see things in the game from a very young age. And I certainly might have helped him a little bit tactically, but he certainly had it. Just the ability to play in front of large crowds, as we've seen over the years, ability to raise his level to whatever came at him through juniors. So whatever I seemed to throw at him, whatever player I threw at him through the National Academy, through the AIS, he always seemed to be able to raise his level. And that's why he moved through the levels in pro tennis so quickly, because you moved to futures, you moved to challenges, you moved to ATP, he always adapted his game and be able to adapt to that level that came at him. His natural athleticism. And the last one, I think, really important, which some people probably wouldn't think, that he actually, you know, in the National Academy in 15 years, I coached about 20 players. So Nick was able to sustain a relentless training schedule and competing schedule for the 9 years that I had really something to do with him. 7 years with National Academy Canberra, a year in the AIS, year in Melbourne. He was the one guy who always turned up to training, turned up to when he had a cold. I had to tell him to go home sometimes to stop training. So not just training, competing. I think that's really important. Sandon, the weekend, he would have played between 20 and 24 tournaments every year from his 11th birth year all the way through to his 18th, 19th birth year. So somewhere between 90 and 120 matches a year, and was able to sustain that for many years in a row. So that's just some of the X factor qualities that he brought to the table. That's all him, that I didn't teach him. I said at the end here, I think it's a really important point. I coach fundamentals, but I don't coach X factor. So I think that's where, as coaches, it's just a really important message. We can create great environments. We can control what we can control. And so when and if talent walks through our door, do we have the environment to develop that talent? And I've been lucky enough to have 2 really talented players walk through my door, and I think they've both reached the highest level in juniors in their age group. And Nick got to number one in the world in his birth year. Annerly got to number 6 in the world. So I think in Canberra, we've been able to create some kind of an environment where we've been able to develop that talent. Before I go on to talking about what I think makes a great environment, I just wanted to get a couple of quotes here from a couple of people who really shaped my life, I think, and my coaching philosophy. One's Anthony Lane, who obviously lives in Adelaide, so I thought it was topical. But just one quote from Laney. Professionalism is attention to detail. This is what he told me when I first got on the tour. Laney coached me for a year when I first went on the pro tour at 19 years old. No internet. I didn't know what professionalism was. I never heard of it. But this quote just stuck with me for my life. Took it into my tennis and into my coaching. So professionalism is attention to detail, controlling the controllables, focusing on the process, doing everything in your power to get the outcome you desire, not wasting time and energy on what you can't control. I think that's important as a player, but also as a coach. I think we can control environments, and there's certain aspects we can control, and some we can't, so we need to do what we can control really well. This book that Laney gave me when I was about 20 years old, really written 50, 60 years ago, but anything you can conceive, you can achieve. Anything is possible. Something that my brother taught me as a coach, Lane. Anything is possible in tennis with hard work, determination, great environment, good coaching, etc. And the last one I think is really important from Brent. World-class players are developed in world-class environments, and I think that's for the majority of players around the world have become really good. Have come out of world-class environments, whether it's in Spain or Bollettieri's or Chris Evert Academy or Moratoglu or Russia, wherever it is. World-class environments produce world-class players. And I think Brent has been successful at doing that. Most of you probably wouldn't know, but he quit tennis professionally when he was very young with a back injury, and he created a training academy in London. Not many Australian coaches had done at a young age. He had a lot of success. Players came out of that. Wayne Arthurs, Paul Hanley, top 10 in the world doubles for many years. Peter Luczak was based there when he broke through into the top 100. Chris Guccione, myself, Alan Jones, Paul Buccanello, a whole bunch of people were very successful out of that environment. And I think what Brent did in Brisbane the first time he was there as a head coach, I think not having designated players to him is created some really great environments that have facilitated players and coaches to reach their full potential. So what is a world-class environment? This is my opinion. People would have other things, I'm sure. But I really believe, certainly when I started coaching in Canberra 2005, this was probably my goal, to set up a world-class environment that would actually rival Russia and Spain and America. And how could I produce a truly world-class players that they didn't need to leave Canberra, and they had everything they needed that was competing with the guys in Spain and America, France, etc. This is my list. I think access to great courts is critical. We've been very lucky in Canberra to have these things. We've had hard, we've had clay, we've had indoors. Bloody cold in Canberra. Try coaching for 4 months outside in 4 degrees. The balls don't bounce. You can't feel your hands. It's not really world class. We had to have indoor courts, and we were lucky enough to get them. Good quality training partners. Ability to train up and down. Nick certainly had that the whole way through his 9 years. Train down and develop your weapons. Build confidence in your game. Train up to expose your weaknesses. I really believe you need to do both to really develop as a player. Good quality coaching, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion what that is, but I think that's important, but it's just one aspect of the environment, like I said before. I think the environment's actually more important than the coaching, to be honest. If you had everything in this environment and no coaching, could Nick still make it? Probably could. Probably coach himself. Good quality coaching is important, but it's not everything. Access to the right amount of volume of training, Really important, private lessons, squads, small group sessions. The volume is another conversation, but as a rough guide, I always say if you're 12, you could be doing about 12 hours on court. If you're 14, probably should be doing about 14 hours. That's certainly what Nick did. Most of my players did around that amount of hours. I think this one's important, respect for training partners and a good training environment. I was very lucky. Nick was lucky to we had a core group of about 8 players. We stuck together for about 7 years, which is a really long time, and they became really good friends, and they wanted to get there to see each other, to muck around together. They became really good friends, lifelong friendships. That was important. Good quality strength and conditioning, ability for the coach to continually address the individual priorities, like I talked about, time in the week to be able to do that, really important. High volume of training. I think this one's important, and Brent developed this in Brisbane, thought it was really important. Somewhere for the players to go and just socialise with each other and build those relationships, pass on their knowledge to each other. I think that's important. On the road coaching, critical. Access to courts for the players when the coach is not there. And really important point, I think this was really interesting, that for 6 or 7 years, this core group of players on Saturday mornings, I did not turn up on Saturday mornings. I had a young family. I did not coach. So but I had the balls there, I had the courts open, I had everything there for them. So they came down for a lot of years in a row, and they didn't actually want me there, and they trained with each other. And often, sometimes for 2 hours, all they'd do is play that arse game for 2 hours. And that's all they'd do. But some days they'd train harder, and sometimes they'd just play points. Whatever they wanted to do, they came down and trained with each other. And I think it's really important for players to have that access to those courts to go out and play with each other if they need. Regular play within your own city is important. Regular match play, really important. Going on international tours, really important. You got to know the level as a player and a coach. National camps that Fishers run, I think they're really good. Help my players a lot. Like I said, 80 to 120 matches per year. Are our players getting that? Probably not during COVID, but I think it's really important to get that volume of matches. Having post-junior and professional players around in your environment as role models. Occasional hitting partners, and they've got that up in Brisbane now. I think that's really critical. You learn so much off your peers, even more than from your coaches. I think when you're in that 15 to 20 age group, all of this, how do you create all this and make it affordable? I mean, I was certainly lucky to have the support of TA to help me create this. How you do that as a club coach, I don't know. Maybe you need the help of TA. I'm sure you do. You need to work with Sand and with TA in those environments. And just to sum up, Nick had brought his unbelievable talent at 10 years old when I first saw him, when he first came into this environment. He brought this unbelievable talent. But I think what we did for him was provide a pathway, an opportunity and an environment so he could develop that talent. And I do think that that's how it works in international tennis. I don't think you can create these amazing players and teach these unbelievable talents. I think if we look at Ash Barty, Dean Menard, the great players we've had out of Australia, we'd see a similar thing. I just wanted to really finish off because I think this is a good point. We can discuss this further. These are the questions I asked myself 15 years ago. I still ask myself when I take on players. Do I have the environment to develop that player? When that talented kid walks in my door, do I have the environment and everything set up to develop that player to their full potential? And if I don't, how can TA help me create that environment? Do I have the knowledge as a coach to develop that talent, or do I need help? I certainly have sought a lot of help in my career. People like Shannon Nettle, Anthony Lane, David Taylor, Chris Johnston, Brent Larkham, Chris Marnie. If I can bail these guys up and ask some questions, it's critical. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about women's tennis until I talked to Dave for 2 hours at dinner. And then I thought, no, I don't know that much. Laney, if you want to understand the psychology of competing as a tennis player, go have a beer with Laney and you'll find out that maybe you didn't know as much as you did. So I think just developing your own knowledge as a coach really important. And the last point, do I always have the best interest of the athlete in mind? I think first and foremost, we want our players to do really well. If we have to pass them on, if we have to send them into the TA academy because we need the clay courts or we need match play or we need something different, we need the players to hit with. We always have to have the best interest of the athlete. It's a selfless job being a tennis coach. You're the guy who sits in the background, usually doesn't get the limelight, and it's all about the athlete. And I think that's what the best coaches, most successful coaches have that attitude, the best interest of the athlete at all times. That's it for me, really. Talked a lot there. Hopefully, took some of that in. And I suppose some discussion about that and what other people think would be great.
Thanks, Todd. That was awesome. I guess just a bit of insight on what that looked like for you back in the day in the AIS. I think the big one for us, just that I've been talking to a little bit, and you alluded to that over the last couple of weeks, just to get the understanding around competition and what competition looks like. And I guess my question to you is, you talked about the talent just walking through your door. Do you actually do you think talent and that just ridiculous competitor is on the same sort of do you think you can teach that talent to be a ruthless competitor?
I certainly I agree that being a competitor is the most important thing. If I have to nail one thing down, what's the most important thing to determine whether someone's going to be good? It's being that, how good do they compete? So I agree that that's the most important thing. But I certainly haven't found the secret. I haven't found the secret yet to teaching that. There's certainly you can develop with experience and you become better. We've seen so many players become better later in life at competing. But I don't think there's any one thing or any great secret to teaching a great competitor. It is a talent, but it also comes with experience. And for me, how do you become a great competitor? Well, you compete, don't you? The more and more you compete. I think so many people as players could tell you those stories. My story as a competitor is the first 5 last round qualies of Grand Slams I played, I lost. So that's quite a lot in a row. And I screwed those up. There's absolutely no doubt. It was all mental. I had chances to win those matches, serve for them, etc. Choked, whatever. But the last 5 that I played, I won. So somewhere along the line, through experience, through all the matches I had under my belt, I developed into a better competitor. That's just my story, but that's the way I see competition and developing as a better competitor is by getting out there and putting it on the line, putting everything you've got on the line, and then learning from the mistakes that you made, and then challenging yourself to do better. That's just my philosophy on how do you develop a competitor. But it takes a long time, doesn't it?
That's good, mate. Yeah, good. Colin's got his hand up. Golf.
Hey, Todd, great presentation. A lot of really good takeaways, so thanks for that. Just got a question with regards to your time with Nick when he was around that 13, 14, 15 age, and also, I guess, with Annerly as well. How many sessions a week were you doing individual technical work on them, as opposed to, say, the small group stuff that you spoke to?
Yeah, so both of them 2. So 2.5 hours with both of them. An hour session one day and an hour and a half the other day. So twice a week with both of them.
Okay, and the rest of the time was then more in smaller groups and at tournaments?
We only generally did 1 or 2 squad sessions a week. I think the missing middle in coaching is the small groups. I like small groups. One or two to three players on court, ideally two. That was probably made up, to be honest, probably the bulk of our training. So that's, 4 on a court, it gets tough, doesn't it? Like to run a really good quality session.
Yeah.
One, you can only do so much unless you're competing all the time as a coach, which is physically brutal. So you need to, for me, that a lot of the real work gets done when you got two players on the court or a similar standard, and a couple of hours and you go out and you get it done. So yeah, that's where I'm at with where I came to with that. So quite a lot of small group sessions with all my players.
Yep, no, that makes sense. Thanks.
Has anyone else got anything for Todd?
Todd, can you hear me, mate?
Yep.
Bucksy, mate. Good to see you, mate.
How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. Just wondering just how you keep kids competing. I'm talking about, yes, these kids do need to have matches. A lot of kids are shying away a bit from competing. The ones that perhaps have less of a desire to compete, do we just write them off as, well, they just not want to compete, they're not going to make it? Is there a way that the kids that shy away a little bit from competing, which seems to be a few, I'm not sure what your views on that are, is there a way that we can keep them competing, so perhaps later on they might just, acquire the desire to start competing a little bit more? Or is it just something that it's just, again, you've just got to want to do it from a young age, and it's not something you can teach from the perspective of, well, I want to compete. It's not about just learning to compete. It's something I'm finding is a challenge.
It's a big issue. It's a big issue in it's a massive issue in Australian tennis, I think.
Yeah.
So my experience is that if you really want to compete but you shit at it, then you probably can improve a fair bit. But if you're not born to compete, I've got two daughters, and my youngest one is a born competitor, and my oldest one is a non-competitor. Like I don't believe you have a non-competitor that you really can turn them into. That's just my opinion, my experience. You can't really turn them into competitors. But without a doubt, if you've got someone who really loves competing, wants to compete, but chokes and does all the wrong things, you can certainly mold that player.
Yep.
That's my experience with it. But I think it's a massive issue. Our lack of competitors, it has been for a long time, a lack of kids who really want to compete in Australia. I don't know why.
Yeah, I was going to ask, can you put your finger on why you think that might be?
Not really. Sorry, mate.
No, that's all right.
Can you?
No idea, mate. That's why I'm asking you, mate.
No, I don't have any theories behind it. We need more competitors, though.
Is there ever been sometimes we come away from a tournament and, you have a winner and a runner-up. There's always an award for, the best competitor, but not, like you have these great competitors potentially that are losing all the time. Like being a great competitor, are you rewarded because maybe you're a great competitor, but you're not winning? We're very much about winning and losing. Where is the reward for that great competitor day in, day out? We know it in our environment. We see, this guy or this girl, she's ruthless competitor, like just awesome, but maybe just not getting the wins or the lot or that she needs to sort of show the rest of her peer group, or that she's as good as, because she competes so hard. Does that change over time? Potentially, I don't know, but I think we're all looking for that answer around the competing side of it, and that was our discussion a little bit on Friday. Is changing the face of competition a little bit, that that makes these kids want to compete more and feel uncomfortable in those competitive arenas. And that's what I guess Todd presented on was just Nick, someone like Nick, when he just loved putting himself out there and putting it on the line. I like what you said there, Todd, about and we get that from parents and from kids, and sometimes from coaches, is like the playing up, playing down philosophy. Well, who's at this squad, or who am I? I think I mentioned to the coaches again on Friday, setting up UTRs, the amount of pullouts that I would have on a Thursday night, because they'd look at the draw, like, well, who am I playing? They see, well, there's no, and again, we can blame that on UTR ratings or the rest of it. Well, it's not going to improve my rating. And maybe you take that away from it. It's like, well, just come play this match, and you're going to improve what you spoke about there. I think is such good value, is that you play someone lesser, you're going to improve your weapons, and that's such a big point to really pass on to our kids, is that you're going to improve your weapons. You play someone lesser, but then you play someone better, they're going to find holes in your game. So there's two ways of looking at those matches that the kids are playing. Really good point.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And interesting thing with Annerly and Nick is they actually wanted to play down. Like Nick, he liked to play up as well, but he liked playing down because he just liked smashing guys. Like he liked winning. And same with Annerly, they want to go out and smash a guy 11-1 and like give a big come on in the guy's face. And so it's an interesting thing that kids don't want to play down, because you're probably more likely to win, aren't you? I don't know. It's an interesting philosophy. I don't know. Yeah, we've got a lot of kids obviously a bit scared to compete, and I'm not sure what the answer is. So I wish I knew.
Yeah. Well,
anyone else got any thoughts on how to develop competitors?
Well, either that, or anyone else have any more questions for Todd? Because I know he's got to jump out on court. Maybe Todd, just talk a little bit about. I mean, you've just until someone maybe wants to ask a question, but I know you've had this kid in your environment a little bit over the last couple of years, in Charlie Camus, who's traveling pretty well. Just a little bit around his journey, and I know, like, as you mentioned before, you sort of passed him on now. You're not doing any sort of work with him anymore, and he's doing a lot of stuff with his dad. And I know he's been up to Brisbane a few times in those different environments. Was the call to go up to Brisbane a little bit just because what was available to him in Canberra that is definitely worthwhile him going up there, or what? Where's his journey at currently?
Yeah, his journey is interesting. So. Very domineering parent who started coaching him, the parent himself, from a very, very young age, done incredibly high volume of training, incredible from a young age. Just to give you an example, last year, the kid had 90 days in a row without a day off, 90. So that's the kind of volume that this dad has done with his son, and I obviously butted heads with the dad quite a bit about that, but it wasn't critical. I think it's a good point, knowing when to pass a player on. I mean, my arm, I've had big problems. I got to have surgery, so it was just time for me to pass him on. I just couldn't hit with him off even feed balls to the level I needed to. But his journey now, he's been really good at a young age because he's done phenomenal more volume of matches than the other kids up until now. So he's had a big edge in that respect through competitive experience, through just the amount of balls he hits and how professional he's been from a young age. And now it is time now for him to leave Canberra. I really think it is time. He's midway through 15th year, and we don't have a big group of players like we did when Nick was here. He could stay longer. So it is time for him to go. So it's just a bit of a trial now for him in Brisbane, and it's really just whether the dad is willing to give up a bit of control of the coaching or not is going to be I know Charlie himself wants to go, but whether the dad will give him up is a big question. I just feel the kid's in his birth year starting to catch him a bit. He's always been number one the whole way through. And just physically, he's not a great athlete because he hasn't done any other sport ever other than hit tennis balls, which is another discussion in itself. He's very slow around the court, hasn't developed physically like he probably should had he done other things other than hit thousands of tennis balls every day. So he's very good on the UTR. He's still top. He's still around 20th in the world or something. So he's tracking very well. But that's where he's at now. I just think Hayden Jones beat him yesterday, and Zach Viala beat him last week. It could turn around next week, but the kids have caught up with him a little bit. So
and that's interesting too, because I know his dad was a professional hockey player, right?
Yep. So his dad was the French captain of the men's hockey team, field hockey.
Which is amazing skill set in the hockey guys. So you think that maybe he would have had some cross stuff going on there. But just quickly, Cody's just got a question here just in the chat. She's having issues online, but she just said, Annerly and Nick obviously reached fairly similar levels as juniors. What were some of the biggest similarities, differences you saw within them as talent walking through the door, and also similarities and differences in your approach towards coaching them, if any?
Yeah, so a lot of similarities in their X factor skills, skill acquisition, really big one. Both really pick things up really quickly. Their ball striking, the ability to create power in their shots, hit the ball bloody hard, serve big. That's really interesting. Both really good competitors, slightly different competitors. Annerly not as good, but she found a way. She won multiple nationals and she found a way to win a lot of big matches. Maybe didn't compete as well as Nick, but certainly she was one of those who really had a very strong underlying competitiveness, but maybe still learning how to kind of bring that out and execute under pressure. So very similar things, but obviously coaching boys and girls, different approach. I coached all boys for like 7 years, and then suddenly I had like 5 or 6 girls. So I had no boys at all. So suddenly I had a big group of girls. So I went on a big education, really. As I started coaching them, it talked to as many people as I could. Shannon Nettle, David Taylor, Chris Johnson, anyone who had been successful with girls. Tried to talk to as many people as I could about the differences between coaching boys and girls, and there's plenty of differences. I think the relationship between you and the girls is more important, and you have to spend more time on that. That's probably my biggest message. Whereas the boys, I can say, lessons done, see you, mate, see you next time. Whereas I think with the girls, you've got to make a bigger effort than that. You've got to go out to dinner sometimes, do some things outside of tennis with them. You've got to just be a friend, and it's got to be more than just the tennis coaching. That's probably the thing that I've learned, and that's probably the difference between coaching boys and girls. The one big difference, despite the tennis aspects of it.
All right, Todd and Laney just joined the conversation. Obviously, in lockdown, he forgot to set the alarm, so he's not going to feel the accolade you gave him in your presentation, but he literally just jumped on. So I don't know if Laney's got a question for you, but
oh no.
Hey, Todd. How are you, Matt?
Laney, you're next, mate. I want to hear your presentation.
I just had a bit of a issue here on the property, Matt, so I had to deal with it. So yeah, sorry, Matt. I was eager to hear what you had to say.
Well, it's all been recorded, Laney, so I'll have to send you the link because I think Todd's got to jump on court. Unless you had any sort of questions or anyone else.
Got 5 minutes.
Because he's got to get going. But yeah, okay. Well, Todd, awesome. Thanks for joining us, and really appreciate your insights there and putting together something for us pretty short term. And I think these are. I've sort of trying to get this conversation started with a lot of the performance coaches here in SA, and this is awesome, and I think gives a lot of insight to your environment and some of the things that you felt successful in that space. So really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening, everyone. Appreciate it. See ya.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
See ya.
Yeah.